The bright buzzing lights of the Los Angeles studio blurred into a chaotic electric haze, but in that moment, all Karoline Leavitt could hear was the sound of Jimmy Kimmel's voice, slicing through the heavy silence. Maybe loyalty to Trump, Jimmy smirked, tapping his cue card smugly, is just the desperate cry of a dying career. The crowd laughed, loud, aggressive, mechanical, but Karoline caught the hesitation behind their cheers. Not everyone was buying it. Not tonight. She sat still, composed, almost statuesque in her tailored navy suit, her right hand resting softly on a folded piece of paper, the Constitution of the United States. A tiny cross necklace glinted just beneath her collarbone, catching the harsh studio lights like a defiant spark. Jimmy leaned in further, savoring the moment, eyes glittering with mockery. "You ever think," he said, voice dripping sarcasm, "that maybe you're just fighting for a man who's already lost?" The camera panned tighter, capturing the beads of tension rising on everyone, except her. Karoline smiled, not the smile of defeat, but of someone who knew something the others didn't. A storm gathering beneath perfect stillness. The laughter stumbled. Somewhere offstage a producer gestured frantically to keep it moving, sensing the energy shift. Karoline's fingers lightly traced the words on the folded document, "We the people." She raised her eyes, steady, piercing, and for the first time all night, Jimmy Kimmel blinked. The audience murmured, a ripple of doubt threading through the manufactured applause. Phones started recording, quietly at first, then in waves. Something was happening, something real. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Karoline's voice finally broke the tension, soft but clear, cutting, sharper than any joke Jimmy could write. "When the laughter fades, Jimmy, the truth still stands." And just like that, the battle lines were drawn, not between celebrity and guest, but between a crumbling narrative and an unstoppable conviction. The real show had just begun. Hours before the studio lights ignited their cruel heat, Karoline Leavitt sat quietly in the back of a black SUV, the pulse of New York City vibrating through the windows. Traffic snarled. Pedestrians rushed by. Horns blared in the distance. But inside the car everything felt frozen, like the calm before a historic storm. The leather seat creaked softly as Karoline shifted, pulling a small velvet pouch from her bag. Inside it she revealed two items, a polished silver cross necklace and a folded worn photo of her grandfather, a WPU veteran in full uniform, standing tall in front of a battered American flag. Symbols of faith, symbols of sacrifice, symbols she would never mock, never apologize for. As the car crawled toward the towering glass facade of the ABC studios, Karoline reviewed her notes again. Not for talking points, those were easy. She reviewed them to remember who she was walking into battle for. The farmer in Ohio who had been taxed to the bone. The single mother in Texas who was called a bigot for wanting to protect her kids. The young student in Florida mocked for daring to wear a cross in public. Each note, each news clipping, each Constitution passage scrawled in her sharp handwriting. They were not props. They were ammunition. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Nervous?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Karoline's lips twitched into a faint smile. "No," she said simply, fastening the cross around her neck, letting it fall neatly just above her heart. "I know why I'm here." Her phone buzzed softly. A text from an aide. "Be ready. They're going to be aggressive. They want a viral humiliation moment." Karoline typed 2 words back. "Let them." The SUV came to a slow halt. The tinted window gave her a mirror reflection. A young woman, calm but unbreakable, staring back. She smoothed a hand over her blazer, lifted the folder of evidence, and stepped out into the concrete jungle. Cameras flashed from across the street. Paparazzi shouted her name. A protester across the barrier screamed obscenities. She walked steadily through the noise, like a soldier marching into enemy fire, her heels clicking a slow, deliberate rhythm across the pavement. Inside the lobby, an intern rushed toward her with nervous energy. "This way, Miss Leavitt. They're ready for you." She nodded once, slowly, every movement purposeful. Karoline did not need cheers. She did not need applause. All she needed was the truth. And tonight, the world would see it weaponized like never before. The green room smelled faintly of hairspray, fresh coffee, and something else. Tension. Karoline sat alone in the corner, adjusting the chain of her cross necklace, watching the crew through the half-open door as they scurried like ants under a magnifying glass. Producers barked orders. Cue card assistants shuffled stacks of paper. An intern, barely older than a high school senior, peeked in with a clipboard and a tight smile. 2 minutes, Miss Leavitt. Please be ready. She gave a polite nod, though her mind was already elsewhere, focused, sharpened, unshakable. Across the hallway, Jimmy Kimmel's laughter echoed through the thin walls. He was warming up, prepping for the ambush. On a nearby monitor, Karoline could see the live feed, graphics mocking Trump, sound bites stitched together to create punchlines, strategic camera angles meant to humiliate. This was not just entertainment. This was a hit job, dressed up as late-night comedy. The producer's voice came through the headset, crackling slightly. Stand by. 5, 4, 3. She rose, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the stage. As she entered the spotlight, the audience clapped, too enthusiastically, too forced, the energy all wrong. Some genuinely curious faces mixed with the planted ones, the ones who would laugh no matter what Jimmy said, whether it was funny or not. Jimmy welcomed her with a grin that barely hid the malice. Everyone, please welcome Karoline Leavitt, proud defender of, let's call it, creative history. Laughter roared from the crowd. Cameras zoomed tighter. The cheap shots had already begun. Karoline smiled coolly, settling into her chair across from him. Jimmy wasted no time. So, Karoline, tell us, when you're not carrying Trump's water, what do you actually do for a living? Another round of laughter. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Not everyone was laughing now. Some shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced at their neighbors. Karoline's hand rested gently on the Constitution, tucked in her lap. The tension was no longer confined to the stage, and it seeped into the entire room. Stagehands stiffened. Producers leaned forward. Camera operators zoomed tighter, sensing something was about to crack open. Karoline met Jimmy's gaze, not with anger, not with fear, but with a terrifying kind of calm. And somewhere, deep in Jimmy's chest, the first seeds of doubt began to sprout. For a moment after Jimmy's jab, the studio lights seemed almost too bright, as if even the universe was trying to expose the setup for what it was. Karoline smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on her blazer, completely ignoring the bait. Her calmness unsettled Jimmy, though he hid it behind another smirk. Well, he pushed, leaning forward with mock curiosity, what exactly qualifies you to speak for millions of Americans who, let's be honest, probably have no idea who you even are? The planted audience laughed loudly again, too loudly, but something was changing, a current running beneath the performance. Karoline tilted her head slightly, studying him, like a lioness studying an overeager hyena. Instead of answering, she opened the folder resting on her lap with slow, deliberate precision. Inside were carefully curated documents, the First Amendment, printed bold and clean, recent court rulings favoring freedom of expression, letters from voters handwritten thanking her for standing firm when others folded. Without a word, she lifted a sheet, a copy of the Church of Lukumi Babalu I versus Hialeah ruling, and laid it gently on Jimmy's desk, like a queen laying down the terms of battle. Jimmy blinked, confused for a split second, then chuckled awkwardly. What is this? Homework? The audience gave a half-hearted laugh, sensing he was reaching. Karoline finally spoke, her voice low and measured. It is a reminder, she said, that this country protects the rights of people, even when people like you think their beliefs are inconvenient punchlines. Murmurs erupted from the real audience members now. Phones subtly lifted. You could feel the energy shift, from mindless entertainment to something heavier, something real. Jimmy tried to claw back control. Come on, Karoline, lighten up. We're just having fun here. Isn't free speech a two-way street? Karoline leaned forward, her voice slicing through the glossy fake smiles like a knife. Free speech doesn't end where your approval begins, Jimmy. The producer behind the cameras made frantic throat-slash gestures. Wrap it up. Change topics. Get her off balance. But it was too late. Karoline wasn't just defending Trump anymore. She was defending every forgotten, mocked, and bullied American who had been laughed at, belittled, or erased because they refused to bow. The audience shuffled uneasily. One woman near the front folded her arms, scowling at Jimmy. A teenage boy, in the back, whispered to his friend, audible over the hot microphones. She's kinda right, though. Jimmy tried to pivot. All right. Tell me, Karoline, if Trump asked you to lie for him, would you? A groan rippled through the crowd. Even for a late-night ambush, that one felt desperate. Karoline smiled, but this time there was ice in it. If standing for religious liberty, constitutional rights, and the people who feel voiceless in their own country is lying, then I guess I'm guilty. She paused, But the real question, Jimmy, is, when did you stop believing in the America that lets people disagree without being ridiculed on national television? The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was radioactive. Someone in the crew dropped a headset. The crack echoed. The cameras kept rolling. Jimmy's fake smile twitched. He was losing the room. Somewhere in the bowels of X, formerly Twitter, the hashtags exploded. Leavitt clap back. Kimmel humiliation. First Amendment fight clips were already going viral before Karoline even finished her sentence. On a split screen, Trump's Truth Social account posted mid-show, Karoline Leavitt destroying Jimmy Kimmel Lev. Incredible courage. A true patriot. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing toward his producers for rescue, but no one was coming. They had set the stage thinking Karoline would be another conservative punching bag. Instead, they had handed her a microphone, and she was building a movement with every word. The air grew thicker. Jimmy went for one last lifeline. Sarcasm. Well, Karoline, it's clear you're passionate. Maybe next time you'll bring your coloring book Constitution and read us some more bedtime stories. A few half-hearted chuckles, mostly silence. Karoline leaned in, eyes locked on him, voice soft but lethal. This coloring book Constitution you mock is the only reason you get to sit here tonight and call millions of Americans idiots without consequences. Mock the cross, mock the flag, mock the people, but understand this, the people are watching now. She held his gaze, unblinking, unapologetic. Behind her, the giant monitors in the studio started glitching slightly. A symbol or a coincidence, it didn't matter. The message had been delivered. Karoline sat back, composed, her folder closed. Jimmy, meanwhile, looked around the studio like a king realizing too late that the castle walls had been breached. The real audience, not the clapping plants, began to clap. Slow at first, then louder. Real claps. Not prompted, not staged. Jimmy waved awkwardly, trying to laugh it off, but the energy was gone. Dead. You could hear the heartbeat of America pounding louder than any monologue ever had. And for the first time in a long time, the late-night circus didn't seem so funny. It seemed broken, and Karoline Leavitt was the one who had cracked it open for the world to see. For a split second, Jimmy Kimmel just stared, like a man realizing the ground beneath him had been hollow all along. Karoline Leavitt straightened her back ever so slightly. Not a dramatic gesture, not a showy move. It was the posture of someone stepping into full command. She placed her hands neatly on the desk, and with a slow, deliberate motion, she pulled a small, glossy White House credential badge from her jacket pocket. The lights above seemed to catch it perfectly, reflecting the bold presidential seal. The audience gasped audibly. Phones whipped out faster than anyone could stop them. Jimmy faltered, his next joke dying halfway up his throat. Karoline's voice was steady, polished, but you could hear the iron behind it. I did not come here to argue with a court jester. I came here to remind millions of Americans who feel voiceless that they are not alone. The hashtag counter at the bottom of the live broadcast screen ticked upward like a stock market graph on steroids. Karoline unstoppable, Jimmy meltdown, voice of the people. Somewhere off stage, a frantic producer hissed into the headset, "Cut to commercial," but the floor director hesitated. The energy was electric. They couldn't afford to cut now. Jimmy attempted a comeback, reaching for sarcasm. "Oh great, now we've got a Patriot cosplay hour." Karoline never even blinked. Instead, she reached again into her folder and slid another sheet across the desk. This time, a handwritten letter from a Vietnam veteran, thanking her for defending faith and family on national TV. Jimmy's hand hovered awkwardly over the paper, unsure whether to touch it. The camera zoomed close. His fingers twitched slightly, visible proof that Karoline had rattled him. Phones captured it. Memes were being born in real time. And then came the moment that sealed it. Behind the audience, a Fox News correspondent whispered audibly into a hot mic, "This isn't a talk show anymore. It's a takedown." The crowd, sensing the momentum shift, clapped. This time not because they were told to. They clapped because they were witnessing something raw, something real. Jimmy Kimmel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed defensively. Karoline, with effortless calm, gave one last parting shot. "Mock all you want, but tonight, you proved my point better than I ever could." Boom. The empire had cracked, and everyone watching knew it. The energy inside the studio had flipped. No one could pretend anymore. What started as a carefully scripted ambush had collapsed into something far more dangerous. A real conversation. A reckoning. Karoline sat forward in her chair, her hands steady, her eyes unblinking. The Constitution still rested in front of her, like a weapon nobody in the building knew how to fight against. The air felt heavier now, thicker, as if even the walls themselves were straining to contain the moment. Jimmy forced a smile, wide, fake, panicked. He tapped his cue cards against the desk nervously, a tick he usually covered better. "Okay, Karoline," he said, voice high and strained. "Let's be serious for a second. Tell the audience why you think your version of America is better than everyone else's." He thought it was a trap. He thought it was clever. It was neither. Karoline inhaled slowly, then spoke, and her voice carried the weight of every forgotten man and woman across the country. "Because my version of America doesn't require permission to believe in God, or speak your mind, or love your country." The room stilled. She continued, her voice gaining momentum. "Because my version of America believes that you do not have to apologize for loving your flag, your family, and your freedom. Because my version of America knows that the strength of a nation isn't measured by how loudly its celebrities can mock their own people, but by how fiercely those people can rise even when they're laughed at, silenced, and shamed." Gasps rippled through the audience. Jimmy blinked rapidly, completely off script now, flailing. Karoline stood up slowly, not storming off, not creating drama, but standing with calm, undeniable authority. She walked toward the center of the stage, the cameras tracking her instinctively as if the entire building knew who the real star was now. Audience members leaned forward in their seats, phones lifted high to capture the moment history shifted. The background noise faded. No coughing, no murmuring, just breathless silence, and then, with surgical precision, Karoline delivered the speech that would be played on news networks and social media for years to come. "We live in a country where soldiers fought and died to protect the right of every citizen, even the ones who mock them, to speak freely. We live in a country where our founding documents don't ask if you're popular enough to have rights. They assume you have them because you are human. We live in a country where you are free to wear a cross, or a yarmulke, or no symbol at all, and no late-night clown can take that away from you." She turned slightly, facing the real audience now. Not the studio crowd, but the millions, watching through screens across the country. "The true measure of freedom isn't how loud the powerful can laugh. It's how firmly the powerless can stand." The studio audience burst into spontaneous applause. Not a slow build, not a scattered few, but a rolling wave, a roaring, undeniable, organic eruption of claps and cheers. Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen at his desk, hands limp in his lap, watching the tide wash away everything he thought he controlled. The director in the control room shouted frantically, "Go to break! Go to break! Cut her mic! Cut to black!" But it was too late. The cameras were still rolling, the streams were still live, and Karoline Leavitt had just torched the entire playbook. Somewhere across America, veterans stood up from worn leather chairs and saluted their TVs. Single mothers wiped tears from their eyes as their children watched. Teenagers who had been mocked for wearing flags on their backpacks posted the clip captioned, "Finally someone speaks for us." On X, hashtags exploded beyond anything the show had ever seen. Or Karoline wins, voice of the forgotten. Freedom is louder even. Mainstream outlets, the ones who hated everything she stood for, had no choice but to cover it. CNN anchors stumbled through coverage grimacing. Fox News ran it on repeat, anchors nearly cheering. Influencers clipped every second. Politicians issued statements of support within the hour. And above it all, Donald Trump fired off another Truth Social post. Karoline Leavitt, American hero, A++ performance. The people love her. Back inside the studio, Karoline walked back to her seat, calm, dignified, untouchable. She picked up her folder, tucked it neatly under her arm, and offered Jimmy Kimmel a polite smile. "Thank you for the invitation," she said simply, with more grace in 7 words than he had shown the entire night. Jimmy mumbled something. It did not matter. The cameras kept rolling as Karoline exited the stage to a standing ovation. Not the kind producers manufacture, not the kind executives script. A real standing ovation for a woman who refused to kneel. As she disappeared behind the heavy studio curtains, the final shot lingered. Jimmy Kimmel, alone at his desk, slumped forward, his fake laughter silenced, his carefully crafted image crumbling under the weight of one woman's courage. The lights above him flickered slightly, and for the first time all night, the king of late night realized the joke was over, and he was the punchline. The morning after was nothing short of an earthquake. Screens across America, from greasy diner TVs to slick corporate boardrooms, flashed the same headline: Karoline Leavitt dismantles Jimmy Kimmel, live, a night that changed everything. The B clips had already shattered records by dawn. Over 120 million views across YouTube, X, Instagram, TikToks, and counting. Fox News ran it on a loop, anchors grinning ear to ear. A masterclass in poise and patriotism, declared Tucker Carlson, with visible pride. Sean Hannity opened his show with Karoline's speech playing unedited, no commentary needed. Meanwhile, CNN's coverage was a hot mess, scrambling to spin it. A concerning rise in far-right rhetoric masked as free speech, one analyst stammered, while another panelist muttered under her breath. She actually made good points, though. The damage could not be undone. Influencers from all sides, left, right, center, shared clips titled, "This is what true confidence looks like. How to stay calm when they try to humiliate you. When the truth walks into the room, the liars scatter." Hashtags dominated trending list globally. Karoline rises, Kimmel humiliated, Constitution wins, America first again. Jimmy Kimmel's team issued a half-hearted statement by noon. "We support free speech and healthy debate on our platform. We regret if any comments were taken out of context." Taken out of context? The internet was not buying it. Meme lords unleashed fury. Images of Jimmy photoshopped as the Titanic sinking beneath Karoline's quotes. Side-by-sides of Karoline's calm stare versus Jimmy's sweaty panic with captions like, "When the substitute teacher knows more than you." One brutal meme went viral fast. A still shot of Karoline dropping the Constitution on the desk, with the words, "The day late-night comedy died." Even bigger, congressional leaders noticed. A coalition of conservative lawmakers introduced a bill called the Free Voices Act, aiming to strengthen protections for political speech across all media platforms. When asked about the bill, Senator Josh Hawley smiled and said, "We were inspired by a young woman who reminded America what courage under fire really looks like." Donald Trump posted again on Truth Social, third time in 24 hours. Karoline Leavitt, the future of this great country. So proud of her standing up to the fake news late-night clowns. We are taking our country back. Karoline's inbox flooded overnight. Letters from veterans, emails from single moms, DMs from young conservatives thanking her for giving them hope. She answered as many as she could personally. Each message carried the same heartbeat. "You spoke for me. You made me proud to be American again. You showed them what real strength looks like." But not all fallout was supportive. Hollywood elites threw a tantrum. Celebrities posted passive-aggressive tweets mocking Karoline's drama. A-list activists called for better vetting of guests on talk shows. Editorials flooded, in warning of the danger of mainstreaming faith and patriotism. It only made her stronger. Karoline wasn't rattled. She wasn't scared. She stood taller. In one radio interview the next day, a host asked her, "How do you stay so calm when the world is trying to tear you apart?" Karoline smiled, the same soft, lethal smile she gave Jimmy Kimmel, and answered, "Because my foundation isn't built on their approval. It's built on truth." By the end of the week, talent agencies were quietly reaching out. Book deals were floated. Podcast hosts begged for interviews. Major conservative organizations offered her keynote spots. She turned most of it down, not because she was ungrateful, but because she understood. This moment wasn't about fame. It was about something bigger. It was about making sure no American ever had to apologize again for loving their God, their family, or their country. And Karoline Leavitt wasn't done yet, not even close. The city was a blur outside her window. Karoline Leavitt sat alone in her modest office, the night pressing against the glass like a silent witness. The world outside buzzed with headlines, hashtags, interviews. But here, in this quiet space, everything slowed down. The only sound was the soft hum of the television in the corner, muted, playing endless loops of last night's footage, her standing tall, Jimmy Kimmel shrinking behind his desk, the crowd erupting in raw, unfiltered applause. Karoline sipped her coffee slowly, staring at the framed item that now hung proudly above her desk, a simple page torn from the Constitution. At the bottom, scrawled in careful penmanship, was her grandfather's name. He had fought for this, not for fame, not for viral moments, for freedom. Her fingers brushed the frame lightly, a silent promise made and kept. Across the desk lay dozens of letters, real letters, not emails, not PM's handwritten notes from people across the country, a retired steelworker from Ohio, a homeschooling mom from Georgia, a teenager from Iowa who had been suspended for refusing to remove an American flag patch from his backpack. Each letter carried the same heartbeat. Thank you for standing. Thank you for reminding us who we are. Thank you for fighting when it was easier to stay silent. Karoline leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of it all settle. Not pride, not ego, gratitude. She turned the TV volume up just slightly, catching the end of a news report. Following the viral confrontation, new bipartisan discussions on media fairness and First Amendment protections are underway. Some are calling it the Leavitt effect. She smiled softly. It was never about her. It was about the millions who had been waiting for someone, anyone, to say what needed to be said. It was about the flame that too many had tried to snuff out. And now, it was roaring back stronger than ever. Karoline picked up the cross necklace resting on her desk and fastened it around her neck. The cool metal pressed against her skin, steady, reassuring. Outside her window, the city lights burned bright. Against the dark, the fight was far from over. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, hope burned brighter than fear, and Karoline Leavitt, young, unshakable, relentless, was just getting started. She did not just fight for herself. She lit a flame that millions would carry.